Korean food is still quite unknown to anyone else. Korean cuisine is a lot more than just fried chicken. We created 100 dishes, but there only one customer only trying our dishes, and that can ruin your night or ruin your experience, everything. This is the pressure I'll always give it to myself. This is the one thing I really want to say to everyone, that
the worst mistake I made making those tart bases was to rush the process. Now it takes me about 2 or 3 days to make a pastry base. I try and balance everything as much as I can while really expanding on the spectrum of flavour, like just trying to reach all the ends there are of flavour.
A lot of chefs out there always cook for something. It could be the awards, it could be the titles, but for me, diner's experience, that's my goal.
When you don't like doing something, you gravitate towards things that give you some sense of comfort, and a lot of times people take support of alcohol. For me, my drug was culinary arts. It almost felt to them that I was running away from academia. In the end, I decided to kind of hold on to my ground and make my decision that I want to be the chef.
Makeup. Is it for us? I say only one. Korean food is still quite unknown to anyone else yet. The Korean cuisine is a lot more than just fried chicken. Joe? Behind scenes of the soup is the layers of flavor. Yes, it looks, some people it looks like a liquid in there, but there's so much work into it. And that's the one thing I really want to put that on my dishes. Keep it natural as much as possible. You enjoy the clam and the silken tofu and the stock made from perla seeds. It's one of the dish that we don't really eat that often. We only eat it kind of time when the like a full moon festival or New Year's Eve or sort of that kind of time. Thinly slice the Wagyu brisket and then you roll it in the needle mushrooms. You usually do a little egg wash in the cook over pans, but I wanted to cook over charcoal so give you the little kind of barbecue-ish style of the food. And we also making I made a kimchi kind of dressing, like sweet and salty, spicy. The dressing on the perla leaves, so it gives you the kind of perla kimchi kind of texture. There's a bit of chili on top. And even like Korean people who come here, they know the flavor. They've been eating it, but they don't really make it at home. So that kind of gives you the special memories for them. Like, oh, it's delicious, you know. It lives in the memory, you know. Like that's why for me the food has to be delicious. I just want people to in their head, I want to try the food again, you know. I want to try the food. I want to eat that dish. I want to eat that noodles. I believe it all comes from where simplicity and delicious food from. You can put all the trendy techniques and skills, but at the end of the day, food has to be delicious. Yes, layers of flavors. It just gives you that complete different experience. And I want people to understand when they had a bite of the dish and they'll be like, oh my God, how did you make this? This is the one thing I really want to say to everyone, that a lot of chefs out there always cook for something. Could be the awards, it could be the titles, whatever. But for me, diner's experience, that's my goal. Well, it has to be done to order, otherwise the mung bean pancake, you lose the texture, it becomes really dry because it doesn't have any binding agents or it doesn't have eggs or flour to keep it moist. So when it's cooked, it has to be eaten while it's still hot. I mean, it's a little cheating. I use mortadella, non-Korean ingredient on top of it. But it's so delicious. So. You know, I remember when my birthdays come, my mom always make like bucket of like a LA galbi, just keep eating it, and to kind of celebrate as well. Yeah. And that's how also wanted to show to the other people as well that how the dish is quite important to everyone, for us. I like cooking over charcoal because you don't cook with the harsh heat, you cook with the nice gentle heat, which cooks all nice evenly as well. I don't think it'll be that. Everything is really good.
Just had a pie earlier.
Did you? Marangi Bakery?
Yeah.
No. How's it good?
I tried the duck pie outside the store, inside the store, just hang it in.
They must be
gold.
really
proud.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought, okay, I'll give it a try.
Okay. I think the Wagyu brisket's okay to eat. The galbi is still good actually. There cannot be a one roster. It should be all equally work together. Like, no, there's no such thing like back of house, front of house, divided. Like our restaurant is quite small, so all our chefs serving the food, they taking the orders as well. If the front of house cannot occupy which table, and then when the guests or diners need help, then our chefs going there and then take the orders too as well. I think that's, for me, that's the restaurant, not divided. Sometimes I don't know who am I cooking for. Like basically, am I cooking for my ego and doing something cool to show off my skill to someone else rather than concentrate everything into the one plate. We create 100 dishes, but there only one customer who only trying our dishes, and they can ruin your night or ruin your experience, everything. So for me, all these dishes has to be treated like all individual, not 100 dishes. This is the pressure I'll always give it to myself and put 100% or even 120% as much as possible.
Shubham, do we need any milk for anything this morning, first thing? Okay. I'll have to call the supplier and see how far the milk is, because I have 10 bottles more mangai. Where's my phone? Do you know there were silver platers? Hey Scott, it's Vaibhav from Chaat Street. How are you today? I grew up in a household where my dad was kind of mostly traveling, and me and my brother, we were both raised by the women in the family. So we quite early on, we got into this habit of cooking for ourselves and, you know, just helping out our mum in the kitchen, which usually was not the case in a usual, you know, Indian household. It is quite encouraging, and I think although understanding that how hard this industry is, we constantly work for only one reward, and that is, you know, when someone's happy or you've touched their soul, or, you know, someone says things like, oh, this reminds me of my mum's cooking, or, you know, of their childhood, and that's essentially why we work ridiculous amounts of hours, really. It's a very typical of almost all cuisines to have a char grill in their culture, in their, you know, when it comes to food. And in Kashmir, it is of a huge cultural importance. In Kashmir, they call it sigri, or the dishes that you prepare over it. There are multiple things that they make. And the idea of having this on was to kind of just have those dishes here, available here, because historically, I don't think a lot of dishes from north of India, besides the one that we usually see, probably the butter chicken and, you know, the dishes that are probably cooked in a kadhai, they've mostly not been available globally. Second. Hey Scott, it's Vaibhav. How are you? Today was just another day for Waza. We started at 9 this morning, started preparing things that are prepared every day. Started off with the malu, which are the potatoes. Takes a while to cook, so we kind of just started off early on. And we fried them for at least 40 minutes.
What?
The oil seeps in, so essentially what it does, it creates this micro pathway for flavors to go in. The potatoes kind of rattle, and because of that rattling, it kind of finds these micro pathways into the center of the potato, and it goes. And now we cook it until the sauce has kind of settled, and then it's boiled for a few hours, and the idea is to kind of permeate this sauce, this liquid, into the potatoes. And when you slice into it, there's spice in the potato rather than just on the exterior. So when you're making paneer, depending on the firmness, so there are two things that are very essential. So a ratio of acid that goes in, that will decide how quickly or how slowly the milk curds form.
What was your first memory of making paneer?
A failure. I was quite young, but I thought by the looks of it, it looked easy. But it was, in the end, I figured that there's a lot more technique involved in making paneer. I mean, at this stage, if you take that out, it is going to have a very mozzarella kind of a texture. So I'm now just kind of using the heat to squeeze the moisture out of the paneer, just to kind of make it a bit firmer. So paneer actually is not, it never was an Indian dish. It was something that was taught to the Indians by the Portuguese, because they would eat cheese and Indians would call it chena. That was the original name of paneer. Eventually it became a huge part of the Indian dining vernacular because of a lot of vegetarianism being prominently followed in India. So also this bag has to have a linen muslin cloth for it. I remember we made ricotta once, and yeah, that kind of changed things for me a bit. So we've got a few things going today. Yeah, we're making the bagels today. Cook the eggplant. We have to make the damalu. We have to cook the lamb flaps. Yeah, the lamb ribs essentially. We have to make the rice pudding, and we have to make the burnt eggplant as well. Shubham, do we have rice? Bags of rice? When you don't like doing something, you gravitate towards things that give you some sense of comfort. And a lot of times people take support of alcohol, drugs. For me, my drug was culinary arts. And with the buzith wangun, which was the eggplant, the smoked eggplant, the char grill rather, we take off the skin, although we keep some of it on purpose on the eggplant, just to add a bit more smokiness to the eggplant. And we're trying to just get rid of the skin. Actually, it's very, very close to my heart because it was something that I remember when we were young. My mum did not have a lot of time in the mornings to actually make us fancy breakfasts. And then we add the roasted chickpeas in. So what roasted chickpeas essentially do is just retain the moisture. It doesn't release water because eggplant by default is a very watery kind of a vegetable. So it will prevent it from splitting water from the main dish. And that's where all the flavor is. So we would always have a piece of bread and something with it, and we got so bored of it. So the only two other things that she would add into our lunchbox to break that monotony of the usual bread, we would either have the smoked eggplant or instant noodles. And I remember when I broke the news that I was going to be a chef, I wanted to study culinary arts. My dad was really, really annoyed and mad. He thought that it would bring shame to the family because the entire family had an academic background. It almost felt to them that I was running away from academia. In the end, I decided to hold on to my ground and make my decision that I want to be the chef, be a chef, and I've moved to New Zealand. We have to heat up yogurt and make it boil without splitting it. So that's why it is kind of tricky. And then we cook the lamb in it. Yes, so lamb yakhni is exactly as the eggplant, but it is a lot more brothier. And again, the idea is the lamb also adds flavor into the sauce. The lamb's coming out really nice. So all it needs are just dried mint leaves once it's almost finished. And for some strange reason, the acidity just elevates, turns that into a whole new experience. So next we're making, it's a rice-based dish it's actually just steamed rice essentially. It's called tahat. Rice has a huge cultural importance in Kashmir. It is traditionally cooked over weddings or mostly at birthdays. So you'd wake up in the morning, you pray. This is given to gods as an offering. So we use any type of a variety of short grain rice. We're using jasmine. It is kind of a more aromatic. So it's just turmeric into rice, putting some salt in. I grew up on it and is of course a great combination with the kind of dishes that we have, and primarily the meat-based dishes, which are rogan josh, kalia and yakhni. Well, chaat literally means to lick. So chaat originated in New Delhi in India, and it was when the English arrived in India. All these royal chefs who were cooking for the Mughals, they were disbanded. Of course, the English had defeated the Mughals, and they had to, of course, now fend for themselves. They started using water from a river nearby, and turned out that that water was contaminated, and people would start falling sick. So the only way to actually have that, turn that water consumable was to add so much salt into it, so much sodium that people could consume it, and it would kill the bacteria in the water. And after people would have finished eating their meals, they would have residual salt on their hands, so they'd kind of just lick it off. And yeah, that's how the name chaat kind of became a blanket term used for all street foods in India. So next we're making one of the drinks that is called kahwa. It's a traditional Kashmiri tea. It also has Middle Eastern roots, and it's traditionally served in a copper kettle like this. It's essentially a concentric cylinder where you put embers in the center, which we are going to do now, and we put tea on the side. So it essentially keeps the drink hot. Kashmiri food has always been a very spice-based menu. You would notice that majority of the ingredients that we use, they have a neutral flavor profile. And the idea is to kind of use something that would incorporate whatever you put into it and takes on the identity of the spices that have gone into it. For example, if you compare a steak It essentially is just a piece of meat with salt and pepper, so it doesn't really take on anything. But paneer, on the other hand, is a neutral tasting ingredient and just takes on the spices that you put into it, and that's what the menu also focuses on. If you notice, we've mentioned ginger powder, fennel powder, and those are the kind of key elements, the heroes of that dish that actually enhance the entire identity and the flavor profile of the dish. So Sikh tuj is also very common. It is actually a street food in Kashmir, and the idea is to have it with multiple chutneys, so that's traditionally what people do. You use your hand. Indian food is supposed to be very, very tactile. So you pull the piece out, pick the chutney with it and have it with your fingers. And the same goes with the kosher kebab, which are also very, very popular. They're quite a turmeric heavy meat mince. That's what the primary flavor that comes through. And of course, red chilies and ginger and fennel. My name is Vaibhav, Visher, and we are currently at Chaat Street, and the space is actually turned into a space called Waza for the period of Wellington Plate this year. 2 salmon, 1 sikh tuj, 1 haq, 3 kulcha, 2 tilvur. So Waza is something that's very close to my heart. It's a term used for a chef in Kashmiri language. These are chefs who are skilled and trained to cook this particular type of cuisine called Wazwan. An identity as a Waza would be a great name for this event, because we are representing Kashmir and the food which actually is traditionally served at weddings. That's daikon chutney. It's a very popular dish in Kashmir. And this is the walnut chutney called the doon chutney. Hafaram tilvur. Okay. All right, new order, 1 damalu, 1 sirchot, 1 buzit wangun, 1 mats. There are a lot of people who have inspired me to be chefs. Primarily, it would be from my family. It would be my mum who actually inspired me to cook. She just made cooking look so easy, and without an agenda or without any incentive, that she would cook with so much love. As a restaurant owner or as a chef, if you get the sense of cooking without an intention, your food's always going to be tasty.
I try and balance everything as much as I can while really expanding on the spectrum of flavor, like just trying to reach all the ends there are of flavor. Does that even make sense? So I'm Corentin, and I make traditionally inspired contemporary pastry. Growing up in France, I think the culture there taught me to respect tradition, and we learnt a lot about history and the hundreds and hundreds of years of different struggles and victories that France has had, and that quickly taught me about the importance of history and how it brings on tradition. My French grandmother, she would wake us up at 6 or 7 in the morning, and we'd have breakfast with her at the kitchen bench, and she'd already be rolling like tart doughs out for dinner, 12 hours in advance. And so watching her put in all that effort into food really taught me to respect what you're doing and to appreciate the process and to put the time that it deserves into it. We lived in quite a small village, and the bakery was a truck that would come to your window, and you would jump out of your window, first floor window, you'd jump out of the window, and I remember Mum giving me change, and we would buy croissants, pain au chocolat, baguettes, and then we would go home and have breakfast, and that was all before work. So I learnt that coming here and buying croissants from New World wasn't the same experience, and eating them wasn't the same experience, and so there was a disruption that I tried to correct and brought into my food routine. Starting butter, I knew that I wanted to bring some of France's more traditional pastry in a modern way, and I think the best vehicle for that was tarts. There's a crispy pastry, there's a creamy filling, there's some toppings and some garnishes that all add flavour, and I think the layers are really important in the food that I'm making. One of my favourite pastries is a lemon meringue. There's so much to it and there's so little to it. The base is the foundation of your tart. So I like to stick to a crumbly pastry, but I make it a little bit thicker so that it keeps its texture, because that's quite important. It also has to hold its filling. So once you make your dough, it's important to let that rest so that the gluten relaxes, and once it's rested, it's important to roll it out to an even consistency and to let that rest. And then I cut out the shapes and I mold the tart, and then I let that rest. And once that's all rested, you can finally bake it, probably 2 or 3 days into the process. And baking it evenly is important, obviously, because it shrinks, and so you can get an oval-sized tart if you don't rotate your tray. I've learnt a lot of those little tips along the way after making about 100 pastry bases. The only way to learn something the right way is to do it as many times as you possibly can. The worst mistake I made making those tart bases was to rush the process. The butter melted and I overworked the pastry, and the pastry got tough and the sides collapsed. And so now it takes me about 2 or 3 days to make a pastry base, and slowing down that process has really made what I think is now an almost perfect pastry base. The praline's another perfect example of the contrast of flavors and textures all in one go. I just get really excited when one thing is many things. And so the hazelnuts I toast to get even more earthiness out of. I keep the skins on, again, to get the real flavor of hazelnut in there. And we add a little bit of salt, just adding to that savory, earthy flavor. That is balanced out by the caramel, which is a caramel that is hard and crispy until you blend it and the sugar really liquefies. And so it's got sugar crystals, it's got hazelnut skins, it's got texture in it, but it's one of the softer elements in the tarts. The lemon curd brings acidity to the tart, which I think is really important. I think one of the things that I miss in any dish that I'm being critical about is acidity. And so this was a good chance to put as much lemon as I could in there, zest included. So we make a curd simply by mixing eggs, sugar and lemon juice, and pour that over some butter. And I use a stick blender to emulsify the mix together so that you get that creaminess, that softness, and that single texture throughout the component. And the meringue is, I think it's straightforward. I make an Italian meringue. It's just more stable and more reliable, and you get a really nice, shiny, creamy texture out of it. Double sugar to egg whites. And I don't know what else to say about that. I don't know what else to say about meringue. I worked in hospitality as a kid, and I grew to really actually enjoying working in a cafe. I was a good barista, and I was actually quite good at running the cafe at quite a young age, and really enjoyed the hospitality life, but I was certain that I couldn't make a living off it, and so I went into some of my other hobbies, which were still creative, but more commercially viable. So I pursued photography and graphic design. I remember being at work and a little bit bored out of my mind, and I actually was watching the first episode ever of Chef's Table, and I was supposed to be working, but I was watching the episode on my phone, which, I don't know, don't tell my boss, but it doesn't matter. So I did what I thought was right, and I told the boss I was leaving. I told her I was wasting her time. I was watching. I fully confessed. I was like, look, I'm reading recipes all day. I'm not doing the best I can be doing, and I'm more passionate about this, so I'm going to move. My first week back into hospitality was rough. I loved the work I was doing, but I wasn't used to being on my feet for 40 hours a week. And I did have some moments where I thought, hey, am I built for the industry? Like, is this something I actually not only want to do, but can do?
Like maybe it's pace at the very beginning, but that's always like that with younger chefs because they don't know the pace at which you work in a commercial kitchen. But you know, you pick that up, everyone learns how to do that, everyone learns the pace of a kitchen.
Alex's outlook on food is really different to anything that I'd seen before in terms of prioritizing producers and produce and flavor rather than just making the most complicated, elaborate dish that you can do, which is what I thought fine dining was all about. One of the people that really did encourage me was Alex, because I learnt that you could make your passions work even in hospitality, which was previously a complete dream, and I didn't know if I would realise that dream. So I just decided to go all out.
I was very, very excited for him. Yeah, I thought it was amazing. I was stoked, I was glad. Christchurch needs more people that are independent doing exciting and innovative things, so to hear that he was doing that, it was just like, I was buzzing for him. It's awesome. It's awesome for him, but it's also awesome for the city. That someone who's as capable as he is, firstly is staying here, and then secondly is doing something independently. I think that was, you know, that's vital to a city, is people like that being here, and so that was great. I was very, very happy.
What keeps me going is that I am doing something I didn't think I'd be doing for another 10 or 15 years. If you want to look at it this way, I'm the only person I can blame for anything that happens, and it's actually really freeing. It's really freeing to make a mistake and go, oh, I made a mistake, I'll just fix it, because no one else is going to do that for me. And so that has been something that has freed me up a lot and has given me the chance to experiment and do things that are different, and if I make a mistake, I'm the one who can fix it.